The desert does not forgive weakness. Before Makeda ever wore gold, before the incense smoke thickened the palace, halls of Sheba, before merchants whispered her name across the Red Sea. There were omens. The sky split open the night she was born. A comet burned low and red over the highlands, not brilliant, not celebratory, but heavy, lingering, like an eye that refused to blink. The priests did not smile, they watched. Because, in the ancient world, rulers were not just leaders, they were consequences. Makeda grew in stone corridors carved from mountain rock. She did not grow with softness. She grew with scrutiny. Every movement evaluated. Every breath measured against prophecy. She learned early that power was theatre. And theatre, when done correctly, becomes belief. By adolescence, she had already mastered. Stillness, that unnerving calm that makes opponents speak too much. She could hold eye contact longer than men twice her age. She could listen without blinking. That unsettled them. Sheba was wealthy, yes. Gold flowed through its trade routes. Frankincense perfumed distant empires. Ivory, spices, obsidian, the kingdom glittered. But wealth invites hunger. And Makeda understood hunger, not just physical hunger. The hunger of neighboring rulers. The hunger of ambitious generals. The hunger of gods who demand devotion in exchange for legitimacy. She unified fracturing tribes not through charm, but through precision. A rebellion would rise. She would not overreact. She would remove its leader quietly, publicly, efficiently. The message would travel faster than an army. Fear, when controlled, is cheaper than war. And yet Makeda was restless. Because wealth and control were surface-level victories, she wanted permanence, and permanence required something greater than gold. It required myth, that is when she heard of him. Solomon, king of Israel, builder of the first temple, the man said to command wisdom that did not originate from man. Stories reached Sheba like fragments of lightning, that he spoke to spirits, that he judged with impossible clarity, that no riddle survived his mind. Makeda did not believe myths, she evaluated them. If Solomon truly possessed something, bien stratiefhedder, divinement, represented either a threat or an opportunity, she assembled her caravan without haste. Camels layered in embroidered fabric, guards trained in silence, gifts so excessive they bordered on insult, gold in quantities meant to destabilize expectation, spices that perfumed the air for miles, rare woods carved into symbolic forms of power. This was not diplomacy. This was psychological warfare disguised as admiration. The journey north was brutal. The desert stripped away weakness. Sandstorms erased footprints. Nights were so silent they felt predatory. Makeda rode at the front. She did not cover her face from the wind. Let the elements witness her. Jerusalem did not greet her warmly. It assessed her. Stone walls, temple columns, soldiers disciplined, not ornamental, and Solomon. He did not rush to welcome her. He waited. That was the first move. When they finally stood face to face, there was no music, no spectacle. Just two rulers calculating. Solomon's eyes did not wander to her gifts. They studied her posture. Makeda spoke first. Not with flattery, with inquiry. And thus began the riddles. But understand this, the riddles were not entertainment. They were tests of structural thinking. Questions about justice. Questions about loyalty. Questions about what makes authority legitimate. Makeda answered without theatrics. Solomon adjusted his posture slightly. That was the only sign. Hours turned 2 days. Private chambers replaced public halls. Candles burned low. Conversations shifted from governance to cosmology, from trade to divine architecture. Solomon revealed knowledge of sacred objects, of covenant law, of the Ark. Makeda did not show awe. but something changed in her breathing. Because if divine legitimacy could be contained, it could be transported, and if transported, it could anchor a dynasty. History does not record their private final night, but legends insist something irreversible occurred, whether seduction or strategy or both. Menelik was born from that convergence. Raised in Sheba, taught restraint before emotion, taught observation before reaction. Makeda did not raise him as a child. She raised him as continuity. When Menelik reached manhood, he journeyed to meet his father. Solomon recognized him instantly. Not emotionally, strategically. Bloodlines mattered, but so did stability. The priests in Jerusalem did not trust this development. And here is where myth fractures into multiple accounts. Some say Solomon willingly allowed Menelik to take a replica of the Ark. Others insist it was theft. Others whisper that divine will orchestrated it regardless of human intention. But one narrative persists through Ethiopian tradition. The Ark left Jerusalem, and when it crossed into Ethiopian territory, the air changed. Whether literal or symbolic, the story insists on consequence. Because sacred objects are not neutral. They impose structure. They demand obedience. They magnify instability. Menelik returned not as a visitor, but as carrier of covenant authority. And from that point forward, Ethiopian kings would claim descent from Solomon and Makeda. The Solomonic Dynasty did not simply rule. It justified itself through divine inheritance. But divine inheritance is not peace. It is burden. Each king wore 2 crowns. One political, one cosmic. Rebellions became theological crises. Drought became divine displeasure. Victory became proof of covenant favor. The line endured invasions, internal fractures, betrayals that bled through palace corridors. Some emperors were devout. Some were paranoid. Some were brilliant. Some were broken by expectation. But none could escape the weight of origin. Because when your legitimacy is tied to sacred history, every failure feels apocalyptic. Centuries passed. Dynasties shifted. But the claim remained. The Ark is in Ethiopia. Hidden, guarded, never publicly revealed. Whether physical artifact or symbolic anchor, its power is psychological. And psychological power shapes civilizations. Makeda's decision to pursue Solomon was not romantic. It was structural. She fused trade empire with divine narrative. She transformed Sheba from wealthy kingdom into origin myth. That is permanence. And permanence is the most ruthless form of power. The highlands still stand. Churches carved from rocks still echo with ancient chants. The Solomonic claim endured until the 20th century. Empires fell. Colonial lines carved Africa into pieces. But the legend remained intact, because stories outlive swords. And Makeda understood that before anyone else. Her gaze preserved in manuscripts, murals, or our histories is never soft. It is assessing, because the true curse of Sheba was never supernatural. It was expectation to rule with divine legitimacy, to carry history in your bloodstream, to never be allowed to be merely human. That is heavier than any crown. And that is why the legend refuses to die. The legend does not fade. It thickens. Long after Makeda left Jerusalem, long after Menelik returned to the highlands, long after the Ark disappeared into guarded silence, the real transformation began. Because myth is not powerful when it is born. It is powerful when it survives. Ethiopia did not merely inherit a king. It inherited a claim that heaven itself had shifted south, and And claims like that change how men think. They change how armies move. They change how rulers justify blood. Menelik did not parade the ark like a trophy. He did. That was the first sign of understanding. Sacred power displayed to loudly becomes target. Sacred power concealed becomes gravity. And gravity bends nations. The highlands adjusted. Priests reorganized ritual around covenant language. Royal authority fused with divine legitimacy. The Solomonic line was no longer political. It was cosmic. Rebellion was no longer disagreement. It was sacrilege. That psychological shift is more dangerous than any sword. Because when kings believe God sits behind them, compromise disappears. Centuries moved like slow thunder. Generations of emperors rose, with crowns heavy as iron. Each one told the same origin story. Each one invoked Makeda. Each one invoked Solomon. Each one invoked the Ark. But here is the part rarely spoken. Divine lineage does not create peace. It creates pressure. The Solomonic emperors ruled lands of mountains and fractured loyalties. Regional lords swore allegiance publicly while calculating privately. Borders shifted. Trade fluctuated. Famine visited without warning. And every drought became a question. Is the covenant weakening? Every defeat in battle became suspicion. Has God turned his face? When legitimacy is supernatural, failure becomes terrifying. Some emperors responded with reform. Some responded with paranoia. Some fortified churches into fortresses. Some expanded south and east, absorbing rival kingdoms in campaigns that were disciplined and ruthless. Because to protect the covenant, violence could be justified. Makeda's bloodline hardened. They learned that mercy could look like weakness, and weakness could look like divine abandonment. So they performed strength. Ceremonies grew grander, processions more controlled, incense thicker, symbols sharper, and in Oxum, in guarded silence, the Ark remained. Whether original or replica, whether literal or symbolic, it did not matter. Belief was enough, and belief can mobilize millions. Time rolled forward. Islamic expansion reshaped surrounding regions. European powers began to circle Africa's coasts. New trade pressures emerged. New weapons, new ideologies. But the Solomonic claim did not collapse. It adapted. That is what myth does when it is strong. It evolves without surrendering its core. Even when emperors were challenged internally. Even when rival dynasties attempted to fracture the line. It provided continuity in chaos. Then came the era of global empires. Colonial ambition sharpened like a blade across Africa. But Ethiopia resisted in ways that shocked Europe. Why? Because when a people believe their monarchy descends from covenant lineage, submission feels impossible. The psychological architecture was ancient. In 1896, when Ethiopian forces defeated a European army at Odwa, it was not merely military victory. It was myth reinforced. The world blinked. The highlands roared. The covenant narrative survived modernity. But modernity does not tolerate sacred absolutes forever. The 20th century arrived with new pressures, reform movements, economic strain, globalpolex. The last Solomonic emperor, Haile Selassie, carried the wave centuries. To some, he was divine continuity. To others, he was a monarch in an industrializing world. The psychological tension reached breaking point, because ancient legitimacy and modern governance do not move at the same speed. In 1974, the monarchy fell. The Solomonic line that traced itself to Makeda and Solomon ended in state power. But here is the twist. The myth did not. Because myth does not require a throne, it requires memory. Today, the Ark is still said to rest in Ethiopia, guarded by a single monk, unseen by the world, untouched, unverified, untested. And that is precisely why it remains powerful. Mystery is fuel. Makeda's choice, thousands of years ago, to seek knowledge, to fuse trade empire with divine narrative, created something stronger than military conquest. She created permanence through story. She ensured that even when the palace stones cracked, the origin remained intact. But there is one final layer. The curse was never lightning. It was expectation. To carry divine ancestry, to rule without appearing human, to never falter publicly, to be symbol before self. That is a psychological prison, and that prison echoed through centuries of Solomonic rulers. Some bore it with grace, some with exhaustion, some with quiet despair. Makeda sought knowledge. Solomon offered wisdom. Menelik carried inheritance. But inheritance is not light. It is heavy, and heaviness shapes behavior. The true curse of Sheba was not supernatural wrath. It was the burden of myth attached to blood. Yet, without that burden, would Ethiopia's identity have survived intact? Would resistance have been so fierce? Would cultural continuity have endured colonial pressure? Perhaps the curse was also armor. Perhaps the weight was also foundation. Makeda stood on her balcony thousands of years ago and looked north toward Jerusalem. She calculated, she moved, she fused, and history has not stopped reacting since. Empires rise, empires fall. But origin stories, they linger. They whisper through mountains. They echo in church stone. They move in incensed smoke. And somewhere in the Ethiopian highlands, in a guarded chamber where no camera is allowed, a golden chest sits in silence. Real or not, it does not matter, because the power of Sheba was never gold. It was narrative gravity, and gravity never disappears. It pools, it waits, it reshapes everything around it. The legend does not end. It absorbs time.